You feel it before it happens, a sudden tightening in the air as if the room itself inhales and holds its breath, and then the warning strikes you not as sound but as certainty, sharp and unmistakable, because Michael steps forward in the unseen realm and his presence presses against your chest like a hand saying, "Stop now, do not answer that call, not yet." Not until you understand what is moving toward you through time and memory and destiny, and the moment freezes as heaven leans in, and then the message breaks through with a force that startles your soul. My beloved child, stay till the end, something huge is waiting for you. You are standing between seconds now, aware of your own breathing, aware of the silence between heartbeats, and Michael's voice moves in slow motion around you, telling you not to scroll, not to blink, to listen carefully, because this is not about a phone or a sound or a name alone. This is about a convergence that was written long before you learned to recognize your own reflection. A convergence that has been approaching quietly while you lived your ordinary days, unaware that angels were measuring moments and marking nights, because there are calls that are invitations and there are calls that are tests, and this one carries the weight of both, and you can feel it in your hands, a subtle tremor, not fear but recognition, the kind that comes when truth brushes against you and you realize it knows you by name. Michael shows you a vision like fire folded into light, a timeline stretching behind you like a road of shadows and ahead of you like a narrow bridge glowing with promise, and he warns you that not every voice that reaches you deserves your immediate answer, because discernment is a weapon as real as any sword, and heaven has trained you to pause, to feel, to ask who is speaking before you respond. Just as ancient watchmen once stood on city walls and waited for the right signal before opening the gates, a historical truth echoed in the old world where messengers were verified by signs before being trusted, because survival depended on knowing who was truly sent. The warning deepens as Michael lifts his sword, not in threat but in protection, and the blade reflects scenes from your past, moments you thought were finished, conversations you never got closure from, names that still carry emotional gravity, and he tells you that some connections do not fade, they go dormant, waiting for the exact alignment to return, and this call carries the echo of one such connection, a name that has been circling your destiny like a comet, unseen for years but always bound to return at the appointed time. You feel the temptation rising, the human urge to reach out, to answer immediately, to resolve the tension, but heaven slows your hand and stretches the second so long it feels like mercy, and Michael's tone remains calm but urgent as he reminds you that even Jesus withdrew before decisive moments, stepping away to pray in solitude before choosing the 12, a biblical fact that anchors this warning in sacred pattern. Because divine timing is not rushed, it is revealed. The air around you shifts and you sense shadows retreating as light expands, and Michael explains that this pause is not punishment, it is preparation, because something attached to that call must be seen clearly before it can be transformed, and if you answer without awareness you risk reopening wounds that heaven is ready to heal properly. The message grows more intimate, less thunder and more heartbeat, and you are told that you are not weak for feeling pulled toward the sound. You are human, and heaven honors that, but you are also chosen to grow beyond impulse into wisdom, beyond reaction into authority, and this is the first layer of the prophecy unfolding around you right now. Michael gently asks you to anchor this moment, to acknowledge that you are receiving something sacred, and in this quiet stretch of time he invites you, softly and only once, to tap like if your heart feels this truth, to comment, Amen, as a sign of agreement, and to share this message with 10 people you feel led toward so that Jesus and Archangel Michael may release a blessing over your life and theirs, not as a demand but as a doorway. And then the invitation closes and the focus returns fully to you. The vision intensifies as flames trace symbols in the air, not destructive but illuminating, revealing that money pressures, relationship questions, and hidden opposition are all strangely connected to the same unresolved thread, and Michael tells you that heaven is not exposing this to overwhelm you but to empower you, because when the call finally comes, and it will, you must recognize it not as an interruption but as a signal, a marker on the map of your becoming. You are shown that some enemies operate through familiarity, through voices you once trusted, while others carry unexpected blessings disguised as challenges, and the difference is revealed only to those who wait long enough to see clearly, and this waiting is not passive, it is active faith, the kind that sharpens perception and steadies the soul. The warning softens into reassurance as Michael steps closer and places a hand over your future, promising that nothing meant for you will miss you, that no delay can cancel what heaven has scheduled, and that even unanswered calls can serve divine purpose when guided by wisdom, and as the moment releases slightly you feel stronger, more grounded, aware that this is only the beginning of a layered revelation that will continue to unfold, because the screen has not yet lit up, the name has not yet appeared, and heaven is still arranging the light so that when it does, you will not be shaken by fear but steadied by understanding, ready for what comes next. The silence thickens after the warning, not empty but charged, like the moment before a curtain rises, and then time leans forward again as the screen in your vision begins to glow, slow and deliberate, and Michael's presence remains beside you, steady and unyielding, because now the prophecy moves deeper, into the part that unsettles even the strong, as the name begins to form, not fully visible yet but already heavy with meaning, and you feel it resonate somewhere behind your ribs, because this is not just a label, it is a signature written into your history, and heaven knows how much power a name carries, how it can summon memories faster than any sound, how it can reopen doors you thought were sealed. Michael tells you not to scroll, not to look away, because this is the layer where many people disconnect, afraid of what recognition might demand, but you are being invited to see without flinching, to understand why this specific name was preserved in the unseen archives of your life, why it did not dissolve with time the way others did. And as the letters sharpen you realize this name is tied to a moment when you almost became someone else, when one choice could have redirected everything. The atmosphere shifts and you are shown a timeline folding back on itself, scenes overlapping like reflections on water, revealing conversations that ended too soon, promises spoken without full understanding, and Michael explains that some relationships are not finished when they end. They are paused until both souls are capable of handling the truth they carry. The name finally becomes clear and the impact is immediate, not explosive but profound, like a bell struck deep underwater, and you understand why heaven warned you first, because recognition without context can feel like shock, but recognition with understanding becomes revelation. Michael draws your attention to the way your heart responds, not with chaos but with clarity, and he reminds you that Scripture records how names were changed to mark destiny shifts, Abram becoming Abraham, Simon becoming Peter, a biblical truth showing that heaven treats names as vessels of calling, not accidents, and this name on your screen carries an assignment connected to your growth, not your destruction. Shadows attempt to gather at the edges of the vision, whispering interpretations rooted in fear, regret, or longing, but Michael's sword flashes once and the shadows retreat, because this is not about reopening wounds, it is about closing cycles correctly, and he tells you that the enemy often tries to rush interpretation, pushing you to assume motives or outcomes before heaven has spoken fully, but you are being trained to wait for the complete message. The story deepens as you are shown that this name has been watching your progress from a distance, not always consciously, sometimes through curiosity, sometimes through comparison, sometimes through quiet admiration or unresolved guilt, and the call represents a crossing point where truth can no longer be avoided. Michael reveals that money pressures and sudden financial decisions you have been navigating are not random, they are part of a convergence designed to test whether you will move from scarcity thinking into authority, because this name is linked to a door of provision that opens only when emotional debt is resolved, and this is why the call arrives now, not earlier, not later. You feel time stretch again as heaven slows the moment so you can feel the difference between nostalgia and destiny, between familiarity and purpose, and Michael reminds you that even in ancient times, messengers were identified not only by their words but by their timing, a historical pattern where the right message delivered at the wrong moment was rejected, but the same message delivered at the appointed time altered nations. The name glows brighter and you sense that whatever is coming through this call will not be small, it will challenge your self-image, your boundaries, and your willingness to stand in truth without softening it for comfort, and Michael assures you that you are not being asked to relive the past, you are being asked to redeem it, to see it clearly and place it where it belongs so it can no longer pull on you unseen. The vision widens and you catch a glimpse of a future version of yourself, calmer, more grounded, no longer reacting to triggers but responding from discernment, and you realize this call is a threshold, not a trap, and the shaking you felt earlier was not fear but preparation. Michael's voice lowers, intimate and steady, as he tells you that many people never answer calls like this consciously, they let them pass or answer them impulsively, missing the lesson either way, but you are being guided to engage with awareness, to let heaven frame the encounter so it produces freedom instead of confusion. As the screen dims slightly, holding the name in place without sound, you understand that this is not yet the moment of action, it is the moment of recognition, the moment where you accept that your story is layered, intentional, and still unfolding, and as the vision settles, you feel a quiet strength replacing the earlier tension, because now you know the name did not appear to destabilize you, it appeared to align you, and heaven is still speaking, still revealing, still preparing you for the next movement of this prophecy that has not finished unfolding yet. The moment does not rush forward the way you expect, instead it deepens, as if heaven presses pause again so you can feel the weight of what is about to be revealed, and Michael's presence shifts from watchful to instructive, because now you must understand why this call changes everything. Why it is not merely a reconnection or a coincidence but a collision of paths that were never meant to run parallel forever. And you are told not to blink, not to scroll, to listen carefully, because this is where discernment becomes survival and wisdom becomes protection. The air grows heavier and scenes unfold around you like moving glass, showing you hidden dynamics that have been operating beneath the surface of your life, people who smiled while quietly competing, voices that encouraged you while secretly hoping you would stay smaller, and Michael explains that not every enemy announces itself with aggression. Some arrive wrapped in familiarity, using shared history as camouflage. A truth echoed in ancient stories where betrayal most often came from within trusted circles, not from strangers, a historical pattern that has repeated itself across generations. You begin to see how this call intersects with those hidden tensions, how the name on the screen is connected to unresolved loyalties and unspoken truths, and Michael warns you that answering without awareness could invite confusion, because this moment is designed to expose, not entangle. The vision sharpens and you are shown threads of energy linking this call to your emotional body, your finances, and even your spiritual authority, and you realize how often you have carried responsibility for outcomes that were never yours to manage, how guilt and obligation were subtly used to keep you accessible, and Michael's voice cuts through gently but firmly, telling you that boundaries are not rejection, they are alignment, and heaven honors them. Flames appear again, tracing patterns around your future, revealing that a financial breakthrough has been delayed not as punishment but as protection, because provision tied to unresolved emotional contracts can become a snare instead of a blessing. And Michael reminds you that even in Scripture, inheritances were released only after disputes were settled, a biblical truth seen when land was divided among tribes according to divine order, not personal pressure. The tension rises as shadows attempt to distort the vision, suggesting fear-based outcomes, loss, or regret. But Michael steadies the scene and tells you that fear is often the last defense of a collapsing lie, and you are not required to carry anyone else's unresolved past to access your future. You are shown that this call carries information, not authority over you, and that information, once received, will free you from patterns that have quietly drained your energy. And this realization feels like a release in your chest, subtle but unmistakable. The narrative shifts toward relationships as Michael reveals that a soulmate connection has been circling your destiny, delayed not by distance but by timing, and this call acts as a catalyst, forcing clarity about what you are available for and what you are not. Because alignment attracts alignment and confusion attracts compromise. You see that heaven is orchestrating a sorting, not to isolate you but to elevate you, and that some connections must be redefined or released so that the right ones can recognize you without distortion. The intensity builds as Michael shows you a crossroads where your response determines whether this encounter becomes closure or chaos, and he instructs you that truth delivered calmly carries more power than truth delivered reactively, a principle mirrored in historical moments where measured decisions reshaped empires more effectively than impulsive reactions. You feel your own authority awakening as you understand that you are no longer meant to be managed by other people's expectations, and that this call tests whether you will stand in that authority without apology. The atmosphere brightens slightly as Michael reassures you that heaven is not setting a trap, it is setting a stage for liberation, and that whatever is revealed through this interaction will ultimately work in your favor if you remain anchored in clarity, not emotion. As the vision begins to transition, you sense that something larger is preparing to intervene, something beyond individual relationships or finances, because this call has activated a higher court, and the next phase of the prophecy will not be decided by human words alone, and you feel the weight of that truth settle over you like calm before a storm, knowing that what comes next will resolve what has been hidden for far too long. The atmosphere changes without warning, not darker but higher, as if the ceiling of the world lifts and you are drawn upward into a place where sound becomes stillness and stillness becomes awareness, because the divine courtroom is now activated, and Michael steps forward not as a warrior but as a witness, his sword lowered yet glowing, signaling that judgment here is not about punishment but about alignment. And you feel time bend again as moments from your life are laid out not in accusation, but in clarity, revealing patterns you could not see while living inside them. You are shown how decisions were influenced by unseen pressures, how certain delays protected you from agreements that would have limited your future, and Michael explains that heaven often withholds answers until the soul is ready to carry the truth without breaking under it, and this courtroom exists outside human urgency, operating on eternal precision. The scene expands and you sense other presences, not threatening but attentive, as if witnesses from history stand silently, reminding you that accountability and justice have always been part of divine order, a truth reflected when Solomon judged between two women claiming the same child, revealing wisdom not through force but discernment, a biblical fact demonstrating that true judgment exposes truth without destroying the innocent. You realize this moment is not about condemning anyone tied to the call, it is about severing invisible contracts that were never meant to last, agreements formed through emotion, obligation, or misunderstanding rather than consent, and Michael tells you that heaven honors free will so deeply that it will revisit moments of confusion to restore choice, not erase it. The intensity builds as you are shown a ledger of energy rather than deeds, revealing where you gave more than was required and where you accepted less than you deserved, and this awareness stings briefly before turning into relief, because clarity dissolves shame faster than denial ever could. Flames move through the courtroom, not burning but refining, and you sense financial threads being untangled, promises of provision no longer tied to compromise, and Michael reveals that money, when aligned with purpose, accelerates destiny instead of distracting from it, and that this recalibration is necessary before the next breakthrough can land safely in your life. Shadows attempt once more to speak, suggesting that asserting boundaries will cost you connection, but the courtroom remains silent to those voices, and Michael reminds you that truth does not isolate, it filters, and what survives truth is what belongs with you in the next season. The vision shifts toward the call again, now seen from above, as if heaven observes it as a symbol rather than a sound, and you understand that answering it is not an obligation but an option, and that the power lies not in whether you answer but in how you answer, from fear or from authority. The courtroom responds to this realization with a subtle release, like a verdict delivered without words, and you feel something lift from your shoulders, an emotional weight you did not know you were carrying, and Michael confirms that this is the breaking of a cycle, one that repeated itself quietly through similar phases and situations until now. He tells you that this courtroom moment seals protection over your discernment, ensuring that whatever comes through this interaction cannot override your peace, and that even if the truth revealed is uncomfortable, it will not be destabilizing, because heaven does not expose without supporting. The light intensifies and you are shown a glimpse of what lies beyond this judgment, a clearer path where decisions feel simpler because they are rooted in self-respect rather than survival, and you realize that this moment has already shifted you, even before the call is answered, because awareness itself is a form of deliverance. As the courtroom begins to dissolve, folding back into the present moment, Michael looks directly at you and tells you that this was necessary because destiny cannot advance while unresolved authority remains in the hands of the past, and now that authority has been returned to you, and you feel a quiet confidence replace the earlier tension, knowing that whatever the call brings next will meet a version of you that is no longer available for confusion, because heaven has already ruled in your favor. The moment arrives without noise, without warning tones or vibration, because heaven does not need drama to announce completion, and you feel it before you see it, a calm certainty settling into your spine as the call finally comes into full alignment with the present, no longer hovering in possibility but anchored in now, and Michael stands beside you once more, his presence no longer cautionary but affirming, because the season of preparation has closed and the season of decision has opened. You do not rush, you do not hesitate, you simply exist in awareness, and when the screen lights up again it no longer carries power over you, it reflects you, steady, grounded, no longer seeking validation or closure but clarity, and the name that once threatened to shake you now feels like information rather than authority. You answer not with urgency but with presence, and in that single act the prophecy completes its circuit, because answering from authority transforms the entire exchange, and Michael shows you how timelines adjust instantly, like gears clicking into place, releasing momentum that had been waiting for your alignment. Words are spoken on the other end, but what matters more is what you feel, the absence of panic, the absence of guilt, the absence of the old pull that once made you abandon yourself to keep peace, and you realize that something fundamental has shifted, because you are no longer accessible to manipulation disguised as familiarity. Michael reveals that this moment breaks a generational pattern, one where you were trained to respond rather than choose, to explain rather than decide, and this break releases a surge of energy that rushes through every area of your life, including provision, because money follows clarity the way water follows gravity, and when emotional leaks are sealed, flow increases naturally. You are shown that a financial breakthrough begins to move toward you now, not dramatic but stable, rooted in alignment rather than desperation, and this stability becomes the foundation for the next stage of your destiny. The call also clarifies your relational landscape, because once you stand fully in yourself, the right connections recognize you immediately and the wrong ones disengage without conflict, and Michael explains that soulmate alignment does not require chasing or convincing, it requires availability to truth, and now you are available. The intensity peaks as heaven confirms that this moment was never about the call itself, it was about who you would be when it arrived, and by answering from authority you have passed a test few realize they are taking, a test of identity, not reaction. The air around you brightens and the lingering shadows dissolve completely, unable to attach to someone who knows where they stand, and Michael tells you that this is how destiny accelerates, quietly, decisively, without spectacle, because heaven moves fastest where resistance ends. As the exchange concludes, you feel no loss, only completion, and you understand that closure does not always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like clarity that frees both sides from repeating the same lesson again. The call ends, but something else begins, a sense of forward motion that feels earned rather than forced, and Michael assures you that what follows will build on this alignment, not test it again, because heaven does not repeat lessons once they are learned. You stand in the aftermath not shaken but strengthened, aware that you have crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, because awareness changes access, and access changes destiny, and this knowing settles into you as truth, steady and irreversible, marking the completion of the prophecy you were warned about, prepared for, and finally empowered to fulfill. Now you understand the true meaning of the warning, because "do not answer that call" was never about fear, it was about formation, about becoming the kind of person who no longer answers life from wounds but from identity, and when the name finally appeared it did not shake you because heaven had already grounded you, already reminded you who you are, already positioned you beyond reaction. This prophecy becomes real the moment you accept your divine identity, not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone already aligned, already protected, already guided, and once you stand there, destiny responds immediately, quietly rearranging itself around your clarity. What once threatened to pull you backward now confirms how far you have come, and this is how heaven moves you forward, not by removing every challenge, but by transforming who you are when they arrive. If this message resonated with your spirit, type Amen as a declaration of agreement, and step fully into the authority heaven has already placed within you, because the warning has fulfilled its purpose, the call has done its work, and what comes next will meet a version of you that is ready to receive it.